I announced that my dad's not paying my college tuition. So my dad has always been this super cheap guy who acts like he's loaded but penny pinches everything. Like, we're talking about a man who buys generic cereal and then pours it into name brand boxes so the neighbors think we eat the good stuff. He drives a BMW that's literally held together with duct tape and prayers, but he parks it at the front of the driveway so everyone can see it. Anyway, I'm a senior in high school and college application season is here. All my friends are talking about where they're applying, and their parents are stressing about tuition costs. Meanwhile, my dad keeps making these weird comments about how I better figure out my future because money doesn't grow on trees. But he never actually said he wouldn't pay for college, so I just assumed he would. Big mistake. I applied to my dream school and got accepted with a partial scholarship. I was so pumped and ran downstairs to tell my parents. My mom was excited and started crying happy tears, but my dad just looked at me and said, "That's nice, honey. Hope you can afford it." I was confused and asked what he meant. He shrugged and said, "College was my responsibility now that I was becoming an adult." I felt my stomach drop. This man had literally never told me I'd be paying for college myself. We'd never had that conversation. I was so angry and hurt that I decided to be petty about it. If he wanted to embarrass me, I'd return the favor. The next week was my 18th birthday party at our house. All my relatives were there, plus some family, friends, and neighbors. My dad loves showing off in front of people, so he was in his element, talking about his successful business and giving everyone financial advice. That's when I struck. During the cake cutting, I stood up and tapped my fork against my glass like I was making a toast. Everyone got quiet and looked at me. I smiled real big and said, "Thanks everyone for coming to celebrate with me. I just wanted to share some exciting news about my future." My dad looked proud, probably thinking I was about to thank him or something. I got into my dream college with a scholarship, which is amazing because my dad just told me he's not helping pay for my education at all. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. My Aunt Janet's mouth literally fell open. Uncle Rick nearly choked on his beer. My dad's face went bright red, but I wasn't done. Yeah, apparently money doesn't grow on trees, but somehow it grows enough for his daily Starbucks runs and his golf membership. A few people started snickering. But don't worry, Dad, I understand. Priorities, right? I mean, that vintage BMW in the driveway isn't going to repair itself with love and good intentions. By now, half the room was trying not to laugh, and the other half looked absolutely shocked. My grandma Rose, who never holds back, piped up and said, "Edward, you're not paying for your daughter's college?" What kind of father? My dad tried to interrupt, but then my mom's sister, Ashley, joined in. Wait, didn't you just buy that expensive fishing boat last month? The whole thing snowballed from there. Everyone started asking my dad about his priorities and why he was being so cheap with his own daughter's education. My cousin Jake, who's in college right now, said his parents took out loans to help him because that's what family does. The absolute best part was when my neighbor, Mr. Peterson, who my dad always tries to impress, shook his head and said, "Man, I thought you were doing better financially. If you can't afford college tuition, maybe you should sell that boat." My dad was so embarrassed he disappeared into the garage for the rest of the party. People kept coming up to me offering to help with scholarship applications and telling me they were proud of me for being independent. After everyone left, my dad came back inside looking defeated. He sat down and had this long talk with my mom and me about how he was scared about retirement and had been stressed about money. Turns out he wasn't as well off as he pretended to be and was panicking about having enough saved. We ended up working out a plan where he'd help with some costs and I'd cover the rest with scholarships, a part-time job, and small loans. But the real win was that he finally stopped pretending to be Mr. After that night, something shifted in our house. For the first time, the shiny mask my dad had worn for years cracked. No more fake flexing in front of neighbors. No more acting like we lived in a mansion when our roof still leaked every time it rained. The next morning, the BMW was gone, sold apparently to cover a few lingering debts. He started driving my mom's old Toyota instead, quietly, without a word. I think part of him realized how ridiculous it all looked when his pride got publicly roasted by his own daughter, in front of half the neighborhood. At first, things were awkward. We didn't really talk for a few days. My mom tried to play peacekeeper, reminding both of us that we'd embarrassed each other, him by pretending, me by exposing. But eventually we sat down again, this time without anger. He admitted he'd grown up poor and always hated the way people used to look down on his family. The BMWs, the golf club membership, the expensive suits, all of it was just his way of running from that shame. I thought if I looked successful, he said, then I was successful. It was strange seeing him vulnerable. For once, there was no lecture about responsibility or money. He told me he wasn't proud of how he'd handled things, but he was proud that I had the guts to stand up for myself, even if it meant calling him out. That was the closest thing to an apology I think I'll ever get from him. From then on, we became a strange sort of team. I started working weekends at a coffee shop near our house, and my dad quietly started putting away small amounts to help with my tuition. He even sat with me one night filling out FAFSA forms, grumbling the whole time about how complicated it was, but I could tell he was trying. The funny part? That embarrassing birthday party became kind of legendary in our family. Grandma Rose still brings it up every Thanksgiving. Remember when Edward got schooled by his own daughter? She says with a wink, and everyone laughs. Even my dad cracks a smile now. When I finally left for college, he helped me pack the car. As I was about to drive off, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $2,000. Not a fortune, but more than I expected. He looked at me and said, "Consider it an investment in someone who clearly knows how to hold her own." I hugged him tighter than I had in years. Because, yeah, maybe my dad wasn't perfect, like far from it. But that day when I stood up for myself, I didn't just expose his pride. I forced him to face reality. And somewhere in that messy, awkward moment of public humiliation, we both grew up a little. Now, when people ask me about paying for college, I just smile and say, it's complicated, but at least my dad finally learned what real wealth looks like. Story. My boss fired me after I took 3 days off to attend my father's funeral, despite having approved my leave. We need people who prioritize their work, the email read. When I returned, I didn't argue or threaten legal action. I simply packed my things and left. A week later, in total panic, the regional manager called. Chapter 1, The Funeral He Never Respected. I still remember the moment I got the call. My father's heart had finally given out. After years of surgeries, dialysis, and hospital visits, he was gone. I was in the middle of preparing a presentation when my phone buzzed with my sister's name flashing on screen. I stepped out, answered with trembling fingers, and dropped to my knees when I heard her sobbing. I went to my manager, Alex Barnes, immediately. "Take whatever time you need," he said, clapping my shoulder, not even looking up from his monitor. I left that same evening. 3 days to bury the only man who'd ever taught me how to stand tall, how to be a man, how to survive in a world that rarely offers second chances. The funeral was quiet but heavy. The kind where everyone's eyes are red. Where the air feels thicker than grief itself. I didn't even check my work email. I couldn't. But when I returned to the office on Monday morning, everything changed. I tapped my badge at the glass door, but it didn't turn green. The receptionist looked up, confused. "Sorry. It says your access has been revoked." I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a mistake. Then I checked my phone. Subject: termination notice. Effective immediately. We need people who prioritize their work. You've demonstrated otherwise. No meeting, no conversation, no warning. I stood there, heart pounding, reading that cold message over and over as the world spun around me. Just last week, I was presenting quarterly projections. Now I was terminated like I was disposable. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't forward the approval email from Alex. I just nodded, walked inside with security at my side, and packed my things. As I walked out, no one made eye contact. But what they didn't know was I wasn't walking away defeated. I was just getting started. Chapter 2. They didn't know who I was. I spent that first day in silence, not out of shock, but because my mind was already at work. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I simply opened my laptop, poured myself a coffee, and pulled up a document I hadn't touched in almost 6 months. Project Nexus, proprietary AI forecasting tool, Draft V 2.3. You see, I wasn't just a mid-level analyst. Before I joined that company, I was building something big, a predictive analytics engine for enterprise retail chains. I had pitched it to 3 firms. One gave me a contract offer. Another offered to buy the code. The third, my current company, Alex Barnes, had promised equity, resources, and partnership. But once I signed over limited rights and handed over a portion of the model to their dev team, they sidelined me. They buried my project under meaningless tasks. Alex told me it's not scalable enough. But then he quietly had his team work on their own version without me. I recognized my own code in the demo they launched last quarter. So I had spent the past year watching my own work bring in millions while I got spreadsheets, coffee runs, and performance reviews. And now they'd fired me for attending my father's funeral. That wasn't just an insult, it was a gift. They had no idea what door they just opened. I didn't threaten legal action. I didn't post on social media. Instead, I reached out to a silent partner, Lena Carter, the same investor who once said, "If you ever break free from corporate, call me." Her response came in 10 minutes. "Finally, let's meet. I've got a room full of people who want exactly what you've built with your name on it this time." I smiled because while Alex was busy counting quarterly bonuses and rewriting my contributions, I had quietly kept developing Nexus behind the scenes. The full version, the one they never saw. And the irony, the one person who signed off on using my code without credit was about to need my help again badly. Because while they were writing my success, they had made one massive mistake. They never checked the license agreement I buried in the data contracts. A clause so small most people would miss it. But not the regional manager, who 1 week later would call me in a panic. Chapter 3. The Clause That Shook the Tower. The call came on a Wednesday morning, exactly 7 days after I walked out of that office for the last time. My phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. Moments later, I saw a transcript pop up. "This is Patricia Langston, Regional Director for East Operations. Please, it's urgent. We need to speak immediately regarding your recent departure and a licensing matter that's just come to our attention. Please call me." I leaned back in my chair and grinned. I knew exactly what they had discovered. The clause was buried deep within the Nexus prototype licensing agreement I had submitted over a year ago, a version they had barely reviewed, assuming it was just standard boilerplate. But it wasn't. I had included a non-transferable, revocable usage clause tied specifically to my employment status. It read, "In the event that author name is terminated, without cause or resigns due to hostile working conditions, all usage rights, derivative works, and integrations related to Project Nexus revert solely to the original author, effective immediately upon departure." It had legal teeth, and it had been signed by their then CTO, which meant every demo, every model, every algorithm they were now pitching to investors as proprietary and internal was in fact illegally used from the moment I was fired. By the time Patricia called, I'd already filed a cease and desist letter with a time-stamped copy of the original licensing agreement delivered directly to their legal team. When I finally picked up her second call, I spoke calmly. "Hello, Patricia." "Thank God." She said, "Listen, we didn't realize that you were using code you no longer had rights to, that your sales team is demoing a product based on revoked IP, that your Q3 investor pitch deck contains stolen material. Yes, I imagine it's quite a mess." There was silence. Then, in a shaky voice, she asked, "What do you want?" And that's when the power shifted. I didn't want my job back. I didn't want an apology. I wanted them exposed, humbled, and held accountable. So I said, "You'll hear from my lawyer by tomorrow. You can either settle quietly or I go public. Press charges, and release a statement explaining how you built your latest tech on the back of someone you fired for grieving their father." Her voice cracked. "Please, can we talk about this privately?" I smiled again. "No, Patricia. You fired the wrong man and you forgot to read the fine print." Chapter 4. When Silence Speaks Louder Than Lawyers. The next morning, my lawyer delivered the official notice of intellectual property violation, breach of contract and reputational damage claims, backed by timestamps, code samples, and internal emails that proved I had created the Nexus framework on my personal Git before ever joining the company. It hit them harder than I expected. By lunchtime, news had already leaked internally. Panic spread like wildfire. 2 engineers reached out privately. They're trying to scrub everything. Repo histories, Slack messages. It's chaos. Dude, you were the glue. Now they're trying to act like Nexus was built by committee, please. But the most satisfying moment came that evening when I received an email from the CEO himself. Subject line, "Let's find a resolution." He offered a goodwill payment, $50,000, if I agreed to withdraw the claims, sign an NDA, and stay silent. I laughed. My lawyer laughed harder because the investors hadn't stayed quiet. Apparently, during a routine Q&A, one of the smaller investors had asked, "Is it true the lead developer of Nexus no longer works here?" And that his IP rights were never fully acquired. The room had gone dead quiet and someone started recording. That clip made its way to an anonymous blog, then a Reddit startup forum. By the next day, tech Twitter was on fire. Another startup exploiting talent and tossing them aside. Guy gets fired for attending his dad's funeral, ends up owning the core tech. And my inbox, it exploded. 3 VCS, 2 rival companies, a former CTO, even a journalist from a major business magazine. They all wanted my side of the story, but I wasn't in a rush. Instead, I posted a simple update on LinkedIn. Sometimes being fired is the greatest promotion life can offer, especially when they don't read the fine print. No hashtags, no call-out, just the truth, wrapped in calm confidence. By the time the regional manager called me again, her tone had shifted entirely. We're prepared to offer a revised settlement, 6 figures, maybe equity. I paused, then said, "You had a chance to value loyalty and grief. Instead, you chose profit and arrogance. Now you're paying both." She said nothing because there was nothing left to say. Final chapter, the promotion I never asked. For 6 months later, the company that fired me no longer existed. Nexus dead, the investors gone silent, the remaining staff let go in waves until only the founders were left, facing legal heat, abandoned clients, and a shattered reputation. As for me, I quietly joined a rival firm not as a coder, but as their chief innovation officer. They offered me full autonomy, triple the salary, and a team of 10 engineers, but most importantly, respect. We rebuilt Nexus from scratch, only better, more secure, scalable, and modular. We didn't call it Nexus anymore. We called it Phoenix because it rose from the ashes of betrayal. Months later, Phoenix launched, and within weeks, it began replacing Nexus in every contract the old company had ever signed. Clients migrated willingly. The tech was better, the support was real, and the name behind it had something Nexus never did. A story worth standing behind. Then one evening, I received an anonymous email. No subject line, just a message. "You won, I lost everything. I'm sorry." It was from my former boss. I didn't reply. Some things don't need a response, only reflection. Epilogue. In memory and in motion. Every morning when I walk into my office, I glance at a small photo frame on my desk, a picture of me and my father. It's the last one we ever took together. I whisper the same words each day. "Thank you for raising me with dignity." I didn't let them take that from me. Because while they thought firing me during grief would break me, all it did was light the fire I needed. Not all promotions come with applause. Some come with clarity, resilience, and a legacy no manager can erase. And this was mine. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to Revenge Exposed because here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks. And every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp. Stay unbroken. Stay tuned.